Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Qdabra's weekly webinar. My name is Patrick, and I'm your webinar guy today, your demo guy. If you can hear me, can you please raise your hand? I just want to do a quick audio check. I don't have anyone else with me today, so thanks a lot, everyone, for doing that. We have a pretty short audience today, just 10 of you, so I'm happy that you could make it. Hopefully, it's March 1st, so are we out of the winter yet? Who knows? It's been 3 weeks since we did our webinar, and I had the flu last week, and we took a week off the previous week. So thanks for sticking with us here when we had our outage. Today we're looking at 4 techniques, and typically in these webinars, what we do is we look at things that come up during our work. So we're doing work for customers. We help them build solutions using SharePoint. Forms obviously are a big part of that, and so when something comes up, usually we'll think, well, maybe we should show people about this technique. Some of these techniques we've shown before. Before we get started, I'd like to do a quick poll here. We've got a couple questions for you. The first question is, what are you going to do with the future of your forms? We've been talking to a lot of customers for 4 years now, since Microsoft announced that InfoPath was discontinued in January 2014. They have extended the support until 2025. They've also shipped a version of it, the InfoPath Form Services, in 2016, SharePoint on-prem. So people continue to use it, but we do have a lot of customers who are looking for alternatives, and we have spent the last 4 years building an alternative called FormsViewer. So I'm just going to take a quick look and see where we're at with the poll. It looks like most of you are going to continue using InfoPath. Actually, this is a multiple question, so it's not 100%. So you got about half of you responding yes to the first 3 items, and now it's a little bit more on the first one. And then very few of you are looking at other technologies, and about 30 of you are looking at Power Apps. That's great. Thanks for that quick feedback. We are doing both. We're actually doing lots of things. We have FormsHere as an option for you, and we feel pretty good about it. We've got a lot of customers using it now. But we also are looking at Power Apps, and we're looking at Formotus and Nintex and other things like that. The second question really talks about the nature of forms, and this is this document-centric question. One of the problems with Power Apps and Nintex and K2 and all of these list-based form engines are that they're not document-centric, and that becomes a problem for a number of reasons. If you could just quickly, maybe you don't know what the answer is to this, but it looks like we've got some people already clicking on it here. Thank you. We'll give it a couple more seconds. But in general, document-centric forms are important because you need them to package up the payload, the data that you're approving or that you're storing, or you need them because you have special data types. So there's audit tracking reasons, there's version tracking reasons. Obviously there's visibility, security issues that come about if you have lists. You can lock list items down for sure, but it requires more work. So anyway, that's good. We got about 75% of you saying workflows, and 63% of you are checking the version history, and 50% are the data types, and then 38% for the audit tracking, and 0 for the list forms. That's interesting. Okay, thanks a lot for playing the poll game here. So today we're really talking about forms that are well, in this case, they're list-centric, believe it or not. We are using FormsHere in the first 2 demos and the last one. And I'll show you another. We're actually using FormsViewer for everything, but and all of these demos today are kind of list-centric forms, mainly because the techniques we're looking at specific techniques, not real forms. Although one could claim that this first form here that we're going to show, the weekly meeting notes form, is more list-centric. So there are forms out there that are list-centric. So we're going to show 4 things. We're going to show you how to speed up a submit by clearing the fields and making it ready so they can submit it again without having to reopen the form. And that's great because it's faster. The second thing I'm going to show is how to update multiple SharePoint list items on submit using a mapping. This is something that came up last week. A customer contacted us. They had a form they wanted to submit, a list form they wanted to submit to multiple child lists. They couldn't do it in InfoPath. InfoPath list forms can't do it. If you use the InfoPath full form and QRoles with submit SharePoint list command, you can do it. I'm going to show you that submit SharePoint list command in a form using QRoles in FormsViewer. It's very easy to set up using our web-based UI now. Third thing I'm going to show is this field track, change history tracking. We're going to show you how to track changes on each field in the form. So this is field level change history, and this came up also last week. We had a customer who was interested in this. There's a couple caveats to this. It works pretty well. I'll show it, and these two examples I'm going to show today, these two forms. I'm going to send them as part of the package, so you'll be able to look at how I did them. I'm also going to show you how I did them in the demo. And the fourth technique is just showing how to mobilize your forms to make it look good in a mobile browser. Now this, we're going to actually show you this form today in a mobile browser, and I think what I'm going to do is put it in the chat window so you can fill it out in advance from your phone. You might have to email yourself the link so that you can get it on your phone, but I'm going to actually do that right now to give you a chance to do this. So we have a site I set up for the demos, and before we get started, I do want to talk about one minor news item. It's actually kind of major, but before that, I want to send you this link here. I'm going to copy this link. You should be able to open up this link in your phone, and I'm going to put this in the chat window. And then you can actually fill out this form in advance if you so choose. So if you click on the link or copy it out and send it to yourself in email, there will be a mobile view that shows up, and it will look good on your phone if you open it in your phone first. I'll talk more about that in a second. First, let's just cover the news event. So we had a kind of a major shocker on Monday. We had a Microsoft mess up, so to speak. Usually they update the cloud on Tuesday. They started on Monday afternoon, and they broke one of our customers Monday night. We thought that maybe it was just this customer because they had an issue in the past. It was just one of the many customers that we have. So we weren't too concerned. We fixed it for that customer. The issue was the people picker, the person picker control, which you see in that previous slide. This person picker control, which we have in FormsHere, clicking on that little icon to bring this dialog up didn't work. Nothing happened. That was the issue. And behind the scenes, what was happening was that Microsoft had removed an API that we were using in FormsHere to open up this person picker. So we finally realized this was a bigger issue on Tuesday when they started updating everyone. And they don't update everyone at the same time. They have a rolling update. And so we started, our tests started failing. We have an automated test suite that runs pretty much twice a day. And it started failing in the afternoon on Tuesday. And so we quickly jumped on it. We came up with a workaround. And we deployed the workaround yesterday, so it was within 24 hours of our larger awareness of it with the test failing. We updated both our European and US instances. So some customers, some of you actually, may not have even been affected because you weren't updated by Microsoft before we updated FormsHere. So I just bring this to your attention because A, the support ticket's still open. If you see something crazy in your person picker, or it's not working the way you expect, or you're not happy with the changes we made, and the changes we made aren't huge. We actually simplified it to some degree. You don't have to select the group, the tenant group, or the group where the user is. So it should reduce the amount of time it takes people to fill it out. There was no scenario where that was actually a value add that we could think of. However, maybe you need to select groups and you want to do it that way. Let us know because the ticket is still open and we're still tracking it. We have the fix out there. We've tested it. We feel confident, but we'll feel more confident this time next week if we don't have any issues. So with that, I'd like to switch to my demos. And the first thing I'm going to demo two things in one here. I'm going to demo the mapping to child lists, and I'm going to demo the subsequent submits. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to click on this link to open up this form. So this is a FormsViewer form that is simply designed in InfoPath Designer. So if I show you this in InfoPath Designer, here's what it looks like. Here's my weekly meeting form, meeting tracker form, and it's got these two different repeating sections here, news and focus. So typically with our weekly meetings, we talk about news, we talk about what people are focusing on during the week. It's a short meeting we have on Tuesday morning, and we also talk a little bit about big customer wins and things like that. But for this purpose of this demo, I'm just creating a simple form here, and I'm using the FormsViewer starter template. So you can download this from our website. I'm also going to include it in the kit today that you get. And this form is a great way to start when you're designing a form from scratch for FormsViewer. It has built into it two different views. This is the starter form. You can see there's no title here. So there's a mobile view and there's a desktop view. And there's also this smart CSS, the cascading style sheet stuff, underneath it, which should make it look good on your browser when you open it, because it's going to switch it automatically to the mobile view. And the way it does that is on load, we have a rule, and the rule, when we finish loading, all of our rules, when we have a QRules form, they're going to be on finished loading, all of our load rules. You can still put them on the form load rules here, but we tend to like to put them here on the finished loading, and that's actually the better place to put them. And there's some reasons behind that, but I won't go into those reasons. But so you can see here that we've got these rules on the right where we're actually trying to detect whether or not they're opening it up in the browser or in the mobile browser. And then depending on whether we see certain things, we will switch to the mobile view. So if the result for the display string or the user agent string has the word MOBI in it, we switch to the we set the default view to the mobile view and switch to it. So this starter form has that in it. It also has some validation in it, and it has a signature control for those of you who are going to be using the starter form on your mobile devices. So that's what I started with. I started with this, and I didn't need the signature control, so I deleted that, but I added these two repeating controls, and that's how I got this form. It took me about an hour to create this form. Mel helped me out a little bit with some buttons. You can see I got nice picture buttons there. So let's take a look at this in the browser, and let's fill this out. So we have a meeting every Tuesday. So we had a meeting on last Tuesday, which was 2/27/2018, and we could automatically fill these in, obviously, if we wanted to, but I'm just going to type it in for now. And this form has, I've got the Grammarly, the spell checking / grammar checking thing built into my Chrome browser, so you can just ignore that. But I'm going to type in a few things. So we have a new person starting in the middle of March. Her name is Curvy. Starting at Qdabra. And we've been making a few changes to this form, so hopefully the cached version is the correct one, and I'm not going to get duplicates. It looks like it is. So I'm actually able to add rows using this plus button. This is a nice UI because it's hard sometimes to see these widgets, the insert item widgets. They're small text. They can't be customized very easily. So we've used a big plus button here instead. So the second news event is Jimmy is on vacation this week. And then the third news event is that I'm going to be taking a week off in April. So not a whole lot of newsworthy events. Obviously, the FormsViewer thing came up on Tuesday too, so we could say FormsViewer person picker, or Microsoft broke person picker control. That's big news for next week's, but I'll add it here too. And of course, you can see Grammarly helping me to check my English. Okay, and so now we have this focus section down below. So these are the people on the team. So we have a small team of about 10 to 12 people here. We've got some subcontractors, but we have about half the 12 people are full-time employees. So I'm gonna my action items this week are to work on the webinar, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna add a couple items down below here. I'm gonna say I need to clean up my O365 site. It's one of these things. SharePoint is a common space, and so if you've taken Psychology 101, you know that there's this what's the word I want to use? Phenomenon called tragedy of the commons, right? So if you have a common area, people litter, and you have to have someone clean up. Graffiti is another example of that. SharePoint is a common area, and I know you can all relate to this. That if you don't clean it up like every month, it becomes old and crufty, and there's a lot of junk. So we have to clean it up. So that's my second item here. And my third item, I'm going to work on this FormsViewer fix, which I already did for the Microsoft issue. And so you can see I can add multiple people here. Let's put Mel in here. And Mel is working on a budget tool for one of our customers in Oregon. She's also working on you can see the debug data down below here. She's also working on a calendar for another one of our customers, who I think might be on this call. And then finally, she's got a high DPI setting she's working on for MLI. Okay, so those are some items here. So I've created 3 items for me and for Mel. If I hit submit now, what's going to happen is it's going to automatically clear out the form. So you can see that hitting submit here, it automatically clears the form. So that's equal to, and this is a bug, it should be clearing this as well. But you can see it cleared everything else. And we're using a command to do that. And that command is actually, we can see it down here in our debug window. We're using this transform command. And the nice thing about this transform command is that it will work with any form. So you can actually use this command in your form, and you don't have to change it at all. So long as you have QRules or FormsViewer, either one, this command will work just fine. And the command, if we look at the form, it's on our submit button. So on the submit button, we have a rule, and the rule is resetting the values, and we're just running that command. The same command that you saw in the slide deck. So this is just really easy to do. You don't have to be worried about. I'm just going to create a new window here and show you that command. So there's the command. This is the same command that I showed here. And the nice thing about it is you don't have to worry about any specific parameters. I mean, this is a little bit, we can explain what this is doing. The transform command is using upgrade.xsl, which is every single info path form will have that if you've saved it more than once. So it's using that XSLT to reset all of the data in your form. So the source file is the sample XML file that comes with your template, and the destination path is everything, so it's /star, and then we're excluding the root node because we don't want to change that. So anyway, suffice to say that clears out your form, and the benefit is that you can then submit another form quickly without having to reopen it. Now the other thing that we did in this first demo is we mapped to these child lists. So on my site, if I go back to my site here, you'll see that I've got 2 child lists, news, and you can see those 3 items there, plus actually the 4 items I added, they're all there. So it mapped those items to my child list with the date. The date's wrong. Need to fix that. Need to figure out what went wrong there. And the focus was also mapped, so you can see the 3 items for me and the 3 items for Mel. So with that one submit, we were able to update those 2 child lists. And the way we did that was using the Forms Designer. So when you update Forms to FormsHere, you have this design button now, and we are adding functionality to the designer to add. It's still early days, so we have kind of a rudimentary way of editing rules. We have a slightly better way of editing lists. So when you go into the Form Designer, there's a SharePoint List Mappings tab, and you can create your mappings to these 2 child lists. And the way you do that is you just name the mapping, you create it. We have 2 top-level mappings, one to the focus list and one to the news list. So the focus list here, you can see it's from a repeating data. It's mapping to that SharePoint list called focus. We only have 3 lists on the site. And it's from the repeating data in the form, and we're mapping the task ID, focus text, and the resource out. And maybe this is why the date is not coming through. Actually, the date's not part of this mapping. So this must be an old version. But you can see how easy it is to create this. Now, the old way of doing this was to use the QRules mapping tool, which you can still use. So let's take a look at that real quick. If you have QRules installed, what you're going to want to do is just go to where your QRules injector is located. And I'm just going to open up my file location. So I'm just typing in QRules injector, right click on it, and then I'm going to go to the forms here. One of the forms that you can see is this info path to SharePoint list tool. So we can open this up in the designer, and we can actually use it in preview mode to look at the mappings. So let's do that. That's not sure why I'm getting that error. So here's the tool. So what I'm going to do is just click preview and then switch to the mapping tab. So this is a tool that some of you will be familiar with. This is the tool we use to take data from InfoPath forms and map it to SharePoint lists. And there's 2 modes. You can import a batch, 1,000 different XMLs. If you create a mapping, you can shred all of that data or map all of that data into your list. The second tab is this mapping tab, which allows you to create the mapping that you use to import the forms, or dynamically, if they're submitting the form on the fly, they use this mapping. So we can import the existing mapping. So let's do this. Let's actually open up the form here. This is our second demo, or third demo. So here's my form, and the mapping file is actually included in the form itself. So I'm going to export that, and I'm going to open it up in the mapping tool and show you what it looks like. And it looks very similar to the what you saw in the designer. In fact, it should look exactly the same. So we'll go back to the tool, and we're going to import an existing mapping. And there it is. And then we'll also specify this XSN. Hopefully this will finish. We're going to also specify the XSN that we're using, which is this top one. Okay, so here's the mapping in the tool, and you can see it looks very similar. So I can select the news, the focus items, and if I do that, you can see down below the mapping and the news items. So these are just mapping to a list in SharePoint, and it's from the repeating data in the form. And if I look at the form data on the right, you can see that I can select the nodes to create the mapping. So it's pretty easy to do this. It just takes a little bit of time, and we have a lot of customers that have used this tool to map their data to multiple lists. Once you've created the mapping, then you add it to your form, and the way you do that is you go into resource files and you just add it. And then you have to add one command, and that command is to submit data to the list. So you can see here we have this one QRules command, which is just submit to SharePoint list. If your file name is mapping, then you don't need to specify anything here. It's just this one command will do everything for you. And that's how simple it is. So that's the second demo, and that's how we did it. You can either use the designer in FormsViewer, or you can use the QRules mapping tool. So let's go and let's do the third demo. Any questions so far? I'm just taking a look at our chat window here. We've got about 5 more minutes to go, and I am recording. So if you have questions, feel free to add them to the chat window. I'm going to switch gears here and show you this other demo. So I talked about mapping to child list forms with the submit to SharePoint list command. Showed you how to do it. So the third demo is tracking changes. Now there's kind of like 3 levels of tracking that we talk about when we're talking about forms. So there's the submit level tracking. So when you submit a form for approval, you want to measure the time it took from the submit to the time of approval, right? That's a typical metric that you want to gather in your process. And so that's what we call submit level change tracking. You're tracking every single time it's submitted or edited. What we're talking about here is kind of a much deeper level, which is field level change tracking. So when you have a form and you want to make sure that, let me just show you what this looks like first. I'm going to just open up the form. We have a very simple sample here called change history sample, I think it's called. And you can fill this out as well, and I'll paste this link for the anonymous version into the chat window here. I don't know if anyone filled out the previous one. You can use your desktop for these as well. And it should work just fine. So this second form, I'm just going to open it up here. It's pretty simple. It's a simple sample form, and it's got 2 text boxes. Wow, it's the simplest form ever. If I type in something into the first text box and tab out, and if I type in something again, it is going to tell me, well, the previous value of that field was hello, and it was at 52 seconds after the minute, 8:30. And once again, if you type another value in, it sets the previous value. So it knows, it's keeping track of all the previous values. In the second text box, let me just put in some fruit here. You can see that that it's actually keeping track in the same way, but it's only showing us the previous values for that text window. So the nice thing about this is that for audit tracking purposes, you can see the previous values and who set them. And you can go back to this one and say what, say new value, whatever, and you can see it's got those 3 values now. So how do we do this? So this is a pretty simple technique. Let me just close some of these windows here. So we've got the form here, and we have these 2 text boxes, so the simplest form ever. And we've added this history section to our form, change history. Now this history section is really easy to add to your form. We actually have an XML template part that you can use to add it called change history. But in this case, you can just use a sample that we give you, or if you want the XML template part, I'll include that with the kit today. You can just add the change history. The key thing though is that we have some rules on these text fields that set the history node. So what it's doing is it's setting the item in this table here. So it sets the current field, so it sets these 2 values here, current field and current field value. And then we have rules that run when we add these that automatically set a column. So we have in this table a bunch of blank values. And the way we do that is we have in default values these, there's a whole bunch of these changes. We have about 10, and you'd probably want to add more if you thought that you'd need to. Now you can use QRules to automatically insert items one after the other, but this technique here doesn't use QRules. So it does require though that you have default rows in your default values, and the reason for that is that it's going to toggle everything, and then what it does is it sets the row for the most current version. So it's keeping track of which row it's on. So current here, it starts off as 1, and every time you insert an item into the table, it increments it here to current equals current plus 1. I think that's right here. And in order to set the row, it has to, it sort of toggles all the values using this toggle command, and then the toggle command will run across all of the rows, right? And but it will set the hello world. It will set the value based on which row is the most current. So even though the toggle is being set for all of the rows in your repeating section, it's only going to actually copy the values for the most current row. So this is a clever technique that we can do out of the box, no QRules required, to keep track of data. And what we're doing is we're keeping track of the value and the current field name. And then what we do is we have a filter on the repeating table that says hide this if it's blank, so if we have some blank rows, or if it's not the current focus, or if it's not the most current item. So we have these 3 different rules that hide all the values, so we're only seeing the history for the text box that we just entered the value on. So that's how we did it. It's a relatively clever technique. Take a look at the sample. I will include the XML template part as well. This sample works, like I said, out of the box. Don't need FormsViewer or QRules for that. Okay, so then the last demo is, and the benefit there is you can keep track of your edits. So you can actually put this in your form under the covers so that people don't know that you're actually auditing it and keeping track of it. If you have QRules, you can use the insert command so that you can have any number of rows. With the non-QRules version, you will have to add a whole bunch of rows to it, and I recommend adding at least 50 or 100 rows, depending on how large your form is. So last technique, mobilizing your form. This is a technique that we have in FormsViewer, and essentially what it allows you to do is to automatically make your form look good on a mobile device. So let's take a look. We're going to open up this form again, and we're going to switch to that mobile view. So by default, it's going to detect on open that this is a desktop view, but I can switch it to mobile. And the difference here is that the mobile view is going to automatically relay out the form, as you can see here, to fit the size of my screen. Now, the way we're doing that, and I showed this earlier, but the way we're doing that is using that command, which is the load resource command. So if I what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the command. This is the wrong form. Sorry about that. So let's open up the right form here. If we turn off the command, it won't lay it out correctly. So the place to do that is here on the finished loading, as we saw earlier. Is this load responsive design CSS. So this command actually loads a CSS file that's in the form. It's actually in the data resource files for the sample form. There it is. There's full width CSS, and then we have another CSS for the signature control, which we're not using in this example, but the full width one is the one that we're talking about. And this actually changes the design in the browser to be responsive. So if we just disable that, we won't have that. So this is an example of a nice FormsViewer add-on that we've got here that we didn't have before with InfoPath, is this ability to create this responsive design. So if we turned it off, we wouldn't have that. And I don't think we have it. Do we have it for the desktop version? We have it for the desktop version as well. It is responsive here as well. But if we turn it off, you won't have this. And I think I'll skip that demo part, but just rest assured that if we disable, well, it's easy to add. We can disable it. Let me just quickly disable it. And we'll upload it as the disabled version. And so we'll just save this out. It's really easy to update stuff in FormsHere. You just go up to your Manage Templates page, and we'll create a new item called FV Starter Modify. Call it well. We just click on this box here and double click the one we want, and it takes just a few seconds here to update it. So we're going to call this No CSS, and we'll put it in our group. And we'll click upload 1001, 1002, 1000, and we're done. So now if I click open on this guy, and I go into the switch to view here, the mobile view. Let's see here. Well, it still looks like it's responsive, but there's something that might have changed. Maybe I need to recache it. Sometimes it will keep the old version. And it still looks like it. So this demo was a failure. So anyway, but the idea is that you get this out of the box in InfoPath with FormsViewer if you use our sample or if you use this command. Okay, so that's the last demo. Not super great demo. I want to quickly switch and talk about our advertisement for today, and that advertisement is FormsViewer, obviously, once again. Here's a new slide that we haven't shown this slide recently. This is our training from last October. So we do the training every quarter, and what I wanted to show though was I really want to talk about what we're doing with FormsViewer. We have this replacement migration path for you. The FormsViewer is the only app out there today that will take an existing XSN that you have and display it in the browser with 0 to minimal effort. So it's low cost, and that's the key thing. It's low cost to convert and it's low cost to use, because we don't charge a license fee for low usage customers on the web. If you're a high usage customer, we have to pay Microsoft something, so it's a small fee, but it's site-based and it's very small. If you're on-prem, we don't charge anything except for support time if you need help. So it's the lowest cost option out there to keep those investments alive, but it's also something that includes a whole bunch of new things, like you just saw with the responsive design, but also with the QRules commands. We showed submit SharePoint lists today. We didn't show get input parameters, but there's a lot of commands we've added over the years that work in FormsHere without code. So they just work as is. We also showed the transform command to reset things today. So a ton of missing features have been added. We also allow you to do it anonymously. So for those of you who filled out the form, I don't know if anyone did, you can actually anonymously give it to your customers, and that saves you on SharePoint license fees. Let's just take a look and see if anybody filled this thing out. I'm guessing that we had one person there fill something out. Let me just see the news here. Maybe the news is a better place to look here. Yeah, somebody is testing it out. So this is nice to see that somebody was able to actually submit it from the anonymous mode. And that's nice because you can have a public-facing form or a web page even that was designed in InfoPath that people outside, externally to your SharePoint site can access. So that saves you on SharePoint license fees. It also gives you a way to surface information to external customers or partners. We do have the designer we're working on. We have a lot of work to do on this still. We're adding data connections right now. We hope to have the ability to change the layout done by the end of the year. This is our main focus right now, is the designer features, because at some point the InfoPath designer will also stop to work. So we want to be ready for that day. So at any rate, this is the quick summary of that. Any questions for me? I'm going to switch back to the other slide deck here. We are done with the webinar, and I'll get the webinar up on YouTube. I'll also put the samples out, send them out to you. Joe's got a question. I don't know. I guess we lost sound there for a second. Hopefully I didn't lose sound, and the webinar video is fine. But Joe, yeah, I'm still here. Hopefully you can still hear me. Thanks for being here, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We had kind of a small webinar today, just 10 of you here or so. But thanks for coming. We're going to do it again hopefully next week. We'll be talking about something new. I don't know what that is yet, but we look forward to sharing it. If you got any ideas, things you want us to talk about, please don't hesitate to let me know. It looks like, Mark, you had audio the whole way through, so that's great. That's great to hear. Thanks for that comment. And I hope you guys all have a great day. Happy spring, eh? Talk to you next week.